Watch right now on the Front News Project. A meat grinder for Russians in Crimea, powerful explosions, enemy planes and helicopters burning. Exclusive footage. Putin goes all in. Russian fighter jets in the skies over Estonia and the Baltic Sea, the start of World War III. How will the alliance respond? And also, Ukrainian drones are obliterating the enemy's oil refineries. Brody Magyar knows his job well. Blazing hot and fiery footage straight from the front lines. Watch right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you. And we'll start right away with the main topic, the rout of the enemy in temporarily occupied Crimea. For the first time in history, Ukrainian intelligence has destroyed 2 enemy BE-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft. But in addition, another Mi-8 helicopter belonging to the Russian invaders has been hit. And also, the so-called Russian head of Crimea, Aksyonov, reported a drone attack on the Faroe sanatorium. According to media reports, there were some very important guests there since 4 state-owned dachas are located nearby. All the details are in our report.
For the first time in history, Ukrainian intelligence has destroyed 2 enemy BE-12 Chaika anti-submarine amphibious aircraft. Along with them, during the occupation of Crimea, another multi-purpose helicopter of the Russian invaders, a Mi-8, was hit.
These B-12 amphibious aircraft are equipped with very expensive and advanced equipment, and according to various estimates, their total cost can easily reach several tens of millions of dollars, or even more. Let me just remind you, just the other day, Ukroboronprom officially announced the production of their Taloka naval drones, which are equipped with a warhead of more than 5 tons. And the Russian Federation perceived this as a signal, specifically regarding the potential destruction of the Crimean Bridge. So the impressive B-12 amphibious aircraft were specifically and precisely intended to conduct comprehensive surveillance and the accurate detection of these dangerous naval drones.
At the same time, there was another attack in Crimea on the Faroe sanatorium. According to reports in social media, some very important guests were present there. On social media, the sanatorium warned that on September 21st, the Faroes Hall restaurant would be closed for special service.
The closed meeting was attended by top officials of the Federal Security Service and accordingly local representatives of the Civilian and Military Occupation Administration of Crimea. In addition, it is worth noting the tactics used in the strikes. They came in several waves. According to information directly from the scene, at least 3 strikes were carried out on this facility. What truly makes this facility quite notable and significant is the fact that there are indeed 4 distinct government dachas in the Faroes area. It should be specifically noted that 2 of the prominent government dachas, numbers 6 and 8, are understood to belong directly to the Russian dictator. Moreover, it is widely known that Putin himself likes to vacation quite periodically and regularly at this very specific and exclusive government dacha.
Russian media report attacks by unidentified drones on Yaroslavl and substations in the Kuban region. In the Krasnodar region, at least 5 hits on an energy facility have been recorded. And while drones are striking Russians, their leadership, instead of defending their own territories, is attacking others. In recent months, Russia has managed to significantly increase the range of its strike drones in frontline areas, beginning to systematically attack Ukrainian logistics in order to stop the transfer of reinforcements and supplies to the front lines, writes the Wall Street Journal.
There are problems all along the Russian-Ukrainian front, but the situation is most serious right now when it comes to the use of FPV drones. And specifically, their FPV drones on fiber optics. This is the so-called Tanevsky direction. The occupiers are trying to block the logistics of Ukraine's defense forces in the Pokrovsk direction. This accordingly concerns the Pokrovsk-Luhansk highway and the area around Dobropilya. In this way, they are trying to minimize the rotation of personnel and the delivery of supplies and reinforcements as much as possible.
In the Kupiansk direction, Russian forces are trying to break through Ukrainian defensive lines in several areas at once. Sabotage and reconnaissance groups, under the cover of civilians, are constantly attempting to break into Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. However, their efforts have not been successful.
The occupiers are trying to use their numerical superiority in manpower and equipment. Let me remind you that the most combat-ready units of the Russian occupation army are deployed in this direction. These include accordingly the Tomansk and Kantemirov divisions. In addition, operational reserves have been transferred to this section of the front, both from the territory of the Russian Federation and from the occupied areas of the Luhansk region.
Furthermore, for several months now, Russia has been forming a strategic reserve from new recruits. This formation began against the backdrop of a certain decrease in Russian losses at the front this summer. When Moscow managed to recruit more Russians each month than were being killed on the battlefield in Ukraine, the Institute for the Study of War is convinced that this fact indicates that the Kremlin does not plan to end the war. On the contrary, it may be preparing to fight NATO.
Is the world on the brink of World War III? Well, in fact, yes. 12 minutes. Russian military aircraft in NATO airspace. In the skies over Estonia. Is that a lot or a little? NATO traditionally claims it responded instantly. Ukrainian military experts, however, express doubts. Meanwhile, TSN's international correspondent Yana Slesarchuk recalls a story that's about to turn 10 years old. The only NATO country that managed to defend its borders from Russia very effectively and firmly was Turkey, led by Recep Erdogan. Here are the details.
12 minutes. That's exactly how long 3 Russian MiGs were in Estonian airspace. These twin-seat fighter jets, which over the past 4 years have become a tool of terror against Ukrainians. Then NATO planes scrambled on alert, forced them to fly back to their own territory.
NATO responded immediately and intercepted the Russian aircraft. This is yet another example of brazen behavior and NATO's ability to respond.
12 minutes. 12 minutes is more than enough for a MiG-31 to gather information about local radars on the coast and to check the air defense response time. However, above all, this is a political move by the Kremlin, which the leader of NATO, the United States, consistently encourages by not responding firmly. This will also go unpunished. I'll look into
this matter. They'll prepare a detailed report for me soon. I'll let you know tomorrow.
But overall, how do you feel about this?
I don't like it. I don't like it when things like this happen.
The head of European diplomacy, former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, understands the significance of the Russian threat much better than other politicians. Iris Claridad.
Obviously, Russia is testing how far it can go. We cannot show weakness because weakness only invites Russia to go further. And the further it goes, the more dangerous the situation becomes, not only for Ukraine, but for all countries bordering Russia.
Estonia is convening consultations under Article 4 of the NATO Charter, just as Poland did a week and a half ago after 24 Russian drones entered its territory. But the problem is that 10 days after the obvious act of aggression against Poland, NATO is still, according to CNN, unable to reach an agreement. Did the Kremlin launch the drones deliberately? Or did they somehow just end up in Poland on their own, deviating from the route laid out over Ukrainian territory?
This happened after the attacks on Poland. This is a systemic test for NATO. That is why we are asking our partners to show unity among the alliance states when we discuss how to strengthen the Baltic state and the eastern flank, because it is clear that Putin is moving to a new level of provocation, which requires an adequate response.
The only NATO country that once responded adequately to a violation of its border by Russian fighter jets was Turkey. In the fall of 2015, after repeatedly warning the pilot to immediately change course, a Turkish fighter jet shot down a Russian Su-24.
Today's losses are connected to the blow that was dealt to us from behind. As far as we know, the Turkish side appealed to its NATO partners as if we had shot down a Turkish plane, not the other way around.
One of the 2 Russian pilots who ejected from the downed fighter jet did not survive. On that same day, Syrian rebels fighting against the Assad regime openly spoke about this on camera. It was precisely to bomb them in the region that the Russian Su was flying there.
The Russian plane dropped a bomb on us before entering Turkish airspace, where it was shot down. Our fighters opened fire on the pilots as they were landing.
The Turkish government expressed its position on the incident at the same time as the Kremlin dictator.
We want the international community to know. We are ready to make any sacrifice if it concerns the security of our borders and the lives of our citizens. It is our international right and national duty to take appropriate measures against anyone who violates our state border, whether on land or in the air.
There was no point of no return, as the Russians claimed. By the summer of the following year, Putin had banned Russian tourists from traveling to Turkey and denied other Russians the opportunity to buy Turkish vegetables and fruits. In June, Erdogan wrote him a symbolic letter in which he did not actually apologize for the downed plane, but assured him that no one intended to shoot it down and expressed condolences to the family of the deceased. In response, Putin lifted the travel restrictions and allowed Turkish goods back onto the Russian market. Since then, not a single Russian plane has crossed the Turkish border. And
now, an analysis of the current situation on the Novopavlovsk front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Novopavlovsk front, the Ukrainian unit repelled 13 attacks in the areas of the settlements of Filia, Zeleny Gai, Podubnaya, Malivka, Yanvarskaya, Kamyshevaha, Voronoi, Novonikolayevka, and Zaporozhye. 2 combat engagements are still ongoing. This week, the city of Orekhov in the Zaporizhzhia region was supposed to celebrate its 250th anniversary, but in the context of a full-scale war, City Day is just another day of survival. The enemy attacks Orekhov almost every day, using virtually their entire range of drones, from reconnaissance Orlans to strike Lancets and FPVs. All the details are in the report by TSN correspondent Ruslan Hermalyuk.
On the bank of the Konka River lie kayaks and canoes abandoned in haste. Ever since the war began, this canoe has been lying here on this pier, just as it was left, waiting for better times when children will return and be able to paddle down the river again. Life here came to a halt in an instant. Children's sports clothes left behind, certificates, posters, and victory pennants still hanging on the walls. Svetlana, whom we met in the city, used to bring her son to this sports school. There were
children, my nephew went, my niece went, my son went for a bit, but not for long. So the children were involved in activities.
The boats, which were just about to be launched for training, have remained stranded on land for years now. The roof is pierced, the walls are slashed, the kayaks are riddled with holes, and the echo of the explosion still lingers in the city. Bombed but unbreakable, Orekhov endures. It's hard to believe, but right here there used to be a children's and youth sports school for rowing. And not just any school, but one that trains specialists for the Olympic Reserve. Young athletes trained here. This was the future of our sporting Ukraine. The war came to Orekhov very quickly, so there was no time to evacuate the school. And these priceless examples, kayaks and canoes, still remain here in the city under shelling, like us, witnesses to the former greatness of our Ukrainian rowing sport. Children's laughter hasn't been heard on the pier for a long time now. The young athletes of the Olympic Reserve who once trained here have scattered across the world with their parents, leaving their dreams of big-time sports on this bank of the Konka, near the ruined sports school.
Attack drones fly over here every half hour. Their goal, as far as we understand, is not so much to disrupt military logistics as it is simply to terrorize the civilian population, to scare people into leaving Orekhov so that they don't help the armed forces. But just a few days ago, a drone landed on the roof of a minibus. Fortunately, it didn't explode and no one was hurt. Earlier, a drone chased a minibus where there are no anti-drone nets and it caught it. The vehicle was damaged and the driver is in intensive care. So we can see that today the Russians are increasingly using terror tactics against the civilian population.
Orekhov is in ruins. All the apartment buildings have been destroyed by aerial bombs and shells. Private houses are being hit by loitering kamikaze drones. Danger lurks from the sky for local residents every minute.
We listen very carefully. As they say, we listen to the sky. As soon as we hear something buzzing somewhere, we immediately hide under a tree or wherever we can. Otherwise, we plant gardens, survive, and receive humanitarian aid.
Svetlana, while it's raining outside, which interferes with the drones, went out to get some milk. She lives with her elderly parents. Because of them, she remains on the front line in her city.
My parents are old, and first of all, they don't want to leave. There are a lot of dogs. We feed them, and cats, we feed them too. And besides, there's nothing to live for.
There are still elderly people remaining in Orekhovo. All civilian infrastructure in the city has been destroyed. There's a constant hum of enemy drones in the air.
Well, we hide in the basement.
This is Gina. He's 49. He lives in the city with his brother. He rarely goes outside, pulls a cart, looking for something to heat the stove with.
Firewood? Yes, firewood.
Gina's silhouette with the cart is swallowed up by fog and rain. Only this dog remains outside, who heard human voices and came out of hiding. He keeps looking at the silhouette, as if searching for his owner who left him alone in this city.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
And now let's move to the blazing Pokrovsky direction of the front, the Russian world. As usual, it's getting more brutal here too. During the day, in the Pokrovsky direction, the enemy carried out 34 offensive actions. The activity of the Russian occupiers was observed near the settlements of Pankivka, Nikonorivka, Novoekonomichne, Krasny Lyman, Luchunishina, Zverova, Udachna, Kotlina, and Dakhna. 3 clashes are still ongoing. Now, not even millions can lure people into Putin's army. Russians are getting smarter and no longer want to fight and die for their dictator's delusions. And this is evidenced by the statistics on signing contracts for military service. In the second quarter of this year, an unusually small number of Russians, just under 38,000, expressed a desire to earn money from the war. This certainly does not cover the level of losses, since the Ukrainian armed forces eliminate on average about 1,000 invaders every day. Let's look at all the details.
The Kremlin has finally started to choke on the war in Ukraine. For the first time since the full-scale invasion began, the losses of the Russian army have exceeded the number of people willing to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. The rate of recruiting contract soldiers is several times lower than the number of those killed at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation assures this. The situation across the border is turning extremely negative for Putin.
In the second quarter of 2025, only 37,900 people signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. This is the lowest number in the past 2 years and 2.5 times less than during the same period last year. Andriy Kovalenko is the head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
Russia also no longer has enough contract soldiers to even cover its losses at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation emphasizes that in recent months, the average number of deaths and injuries in the Russian army has been over 1,000 people per day. At the same time, according to the General Staff, Russia's losses in this war have already exceeded 1,100,000 soldiers.
There are already not always enough contract soldiers to cover the Russian army's weekly irrecoverable losses. Andriy Kovalenko is the head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
It seems there are fewer and fewer fools willing to join Putin's army. Even the most die-hard Z patriots understand perfectly well that the road leads only one way. In most Russian cities, cemeteries are overflowing with fresh graves of occupiers who perished in Ukraine. There's nowhere left to bury the Cargo 200. There is a catastrophic shortage of places for the coffins coming back from the front.
See, these are the cemetery gates. People are still being buried outside the cemetery gates. They've started some kind of logging here, and everything here is just as it was before. But they also keep burying people in this ravine, right on loose soil, and below there's groundwater.
After seeing all this, no one wants to sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Even the millions of rubles, huge sums by the standards of rural Russia, offered for joining the occupier's army no longer work. In the 4th year of the war, no one is rushing to line up at Russian military recruitment offices anymore. As a result, instead of the best, the Russian army is now taking the best of the worst.
The recruitment offices absolutely have to meet their quotas, so if they genuinely don't see certain crucial medical documents, or if they specifically want to see them, they tend to significantly overstate the fitness category.
To make up for the shortage of cannon fodder at the front, Russian drug addicts, HIV-infected tuberculosis patients, and all kinds of social outcasts are being sent to the front in droves. Some citizens in Russia have built entire businesses around them.
According to the publication People of Baikal in the Irkutsk region, they have started paying 40,000 rubles for recruiting someone to the war. As a local resident in the administration of Ussolye-Sibirskoye said, you can receive the money if you convince a citizen who is hesitant, if you help them make up their mind. It is not necessary to come to the military enlistment office with the volunteer, but then a local administration employee gets involved. It is enough that, when signing the contract, the future soldier writes 2 statements and indicates who convinced him to come. Within 7 days, this social payment as a volunteer will be credited to his account.
However, Russian recruiters complain that it's hard to persuade anyone to sign a contract with just words at the military enlistment offices. Especially when, at the entrance, you are met by dozens or even hundreds of already wounded soldiers begging the state for the assistance promised by Putin for their injuries.
What they say on TV about helping the wounded, about helping in general, no one actually does it. You just go from one corridor to another, knocking on different doors, and it's all useless.
All of this completely kills any desire among Russians and those at the front. As a result, military commissars have to resort to using force, intimidation, and threats against potential recruits.
Very often, unfortunately, significant force is frequently used during the conscription of young draftees here in this region, but
even under the threat of prison or torture, which has recently become a common practice in Russian military enlistment offices, it is becoming harder and harder to break people and force them to sign a contract with the army. Analysts say that soon Putin's army will simply choke. With each passing day, it is becoming harder for the Kremlin to make up for losses at the front. As a result, on some fronts, the enemy has practically left their flanks exposed. Experts say that this is exactly what the Ukrainian armed forces may take advantage of in the near future. Meanwhile, the military has already announced a major counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The so-called Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. In the Kramatorsk direction, our defenders repelled 3 attempts by the invaders to advance towards Stupochki and Novomarkove. In the Toretsk direction, the occupiers launched 9 assaults today on our defenders' positions in the areas of Pleshchevka, Rusinovi Yar, Poltavka, and Toretsk. The defense forces are steadfastly holding back the onslaught and have repelled all enemy attacks. An oil refinery blown up, destroyed enemy equipment and manpower. A damaged oil pipeline that gives Putin money for the war. The terror of the occupiers, Brody Magyar, has been leading the power of the Ukrainian armed forces' drone systems for 100 days now. Right now, we will tell you about the boldest and most effective operations during this period and calculate the damage inflicted on the army and military infrastructure of the aggressor country by Magyar's 1,000-strong flock of drones.
Almost 77,000 Russian targets have been hit. 18,500 occupiers have been eliminated. Russia is facing a fuel crisis. Hungary is involved. And all of this is the result of just 100 days of work by Brody, call sign Magyar, as the commander of the drone systems forces.
All the efforts of the SBS Group Command are focused on building up the capabilities of the SBS branch of the military, which had been effectively squandered over the previous year. Regardless of the reasons, it's simply a fact. SBS is becoming a force that directly impacts the front line.
Russian oil refineries have felt this impact especially acutely. In August alone, unmanned systems forces attacked Russian oil refineries 17 times. Almost a quarter of the enemy's production capacity was put out of commission. Again, we're only talking about August. In September, the SBS did not stop either. As a result, the Russian Federation is facing a fuel crisis. There is no gasoline at many gas stations, both in Russia and in the temporarily occupied territories.
Gasoline prices have been significantly jacked up 2 or even 3 times recently, so there's absolutely no feasible way to get around. To attempt to travel with that kind of exorbitant money would just be severely harming ourselves and our financial well-being, so consequently we simply can't leave at this present moment.
Online, the strikes by unmanned systems forces are already being called Magyar's sanctions. The latest strikes have affected not only Russia, but also the Kremlin's loyal servants, particularly Hungary, because friendship with Russia is a bad idea. The Druzhba oil pipeline has been hit multiple times, and each time the oil flow was halted. The Hungarian authorities were furious, threatened Ukraine, and even banned Magyar himself from entering, but Brody didn't seem particularly upset.
There are plenty of real Magyars in Hungary, and someday you'll leave them to it. As for restricting Schengen, you're biting off more than you can chew. You have a strange sense of humor. And special agents aren't in the top 10, so get in line.
And those are just the results you can see with the naked eye. There's also the routine work, eliminating occupiers and their equipment. By the way, there have been impressive successes here as well. Just shooting down the expensive Russian drone Arion is an achievement in itself, isn't it? This is the first time a strike reconnaissance drone has been shot down during the entire full-scale war. The cost of this drone exceeds $5 million. According to Magyar, the effectiveness of drone forces has increased by 71% compared to May of last year. And it's safe to say this is just the beginning. There will be even more strikes. Russia, we should get used to gasoline shortages in Hungary, bury the friendship, and ordinary occupiers should remember that drones are watching them everywhere.
And now it's time to analyze the situation on the Lyman front. The enemy army is, once again, acting true to form. On the Lyman front, Ukrainian soldiers repelled 12 assault attempts by the invaders near the settlements of Hrikivka, Novomikhailivka, Shandriholove, Kalodizi, Torske, and Novoselivka. Another 5 clashes are still ongoing. In Russia, the scandalous general who slept through the breakthrough by the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region has been removed. Colonel General Alexander Lapin has been dismissed from military service. Earlier, under Lapin's command, a gap in the region's defenses was discovered, which Ukrainian forces exploited. We have prepared all the details especially for you.
Putin's failed general is once again in the spotlight.
Only forward and only towards victory.
Alexander Lapin, famous for his major military failures, has been dismissed from military service.
Sergeants, officers, my esteemed comrades in arms, today, with profound respect and immense pride, we gather to honor the very best and most courageous sons of our beloved homeland, the truly great and magnificent nation of Russia. I believe in you. I believe that together we will successfully accomplish all the assigned tasks.
Apparently, Lapin's faith didn't help him after all. Rumors about his resignation had been circulating since early August. But that's not surprising. After all, it's hard to find a general like him in the Russian army.
You have successfully and completely accomplished all of the assigned tasks. You have demonstrated remarkable courage, unwavering bravery, and truly exceptional training.
Some may be successful, but not Lapin. The general of the occupiers has repeatedly found himself at the center of major scandals.
First of all, he failed the Kharkiv operation. He also failed the defense of Lyman at the time. And then, when he was appointed commander of the Sever Group, which includes the Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk formations, he failed the renewed offensive in the Kharkiv operation. That is the Volchansk direction and the direction toward Livtsi. All of this was planned to be carried out by the forces of the entire Belgorod military group.
After the retreat of Russian troops, Lapin was criticized by the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, who called the general an incompetent person protected at the top by the chief of the general staff. Soon after, Lapin was dismissed. In January 2023, Lapin was appointed chief of the main staff of the Russian ground forces. In 2024, the general became the head of the Leningrad military district and the Seva North Group, which was formed on its basis. It was at that time that Lapin disgraced himself on the Kursk front.
When, in just a matter of days and a little over a week, Ukraine's defense forces expanded their zone of control in the Kursk region to more than 1,000 square kilometers, it was an enormous failure of the Kursk region's defense and a complete disorganization of the entire Sever group of forces. It then took the Russian troops many long months to stabilize the situation and go on the counteroffensive. And again, General Lapin's counteroffensive failed. His group carried it, suffered such heavy losses that they even had to turn to North Korea for help. That is a humiliating request.
Lapin tried to correct the situation. He wanted to impress the leadership with Operation Pipe, in which Russian military personnel tried to get closer to the gas pipeline.
Sudzi! Are they blocking the traffic or what happened? Henna, what do you say, bro?
It's just a well-known fact that the Russians never got anywhere and remained stuck in a hole for the rest of their lives.
Some of the soldiers suffocated, while other participants were killed in the SU.
The fact is that the operation itself was completely pointless. Even then, the Ukrainian defense forces were conducting rearguard battles, meaning they were retreating from the Kursk region and directly from Sudzha. Lapin launched Operation Stream to impress the military political leadership to show his importance and usefulness. But in reality, this operation was absolutely pointless, since Sudzha had already been abandoned by the Ukrainian defense forces, who were withdrawing to more advantageous positions.
Despite the obvious failure of the operation, Kremlin propaganda insisted on its success, which slightly boosted Lapin's rating, and he was entrusted with forming a buffer zone in the Sumy region.
At the very start of the Sumy operation, which commenced in the year 2025, Lapin commanded a formidable Kursk group that was, in fact, twice as large as the Belvera group had been during the preceding year of 2024. As a direct and significant result, over the extensive course of 3 full months of the Sumy military operation, the distinguished General Lapin successfully captured the very same strategic area that had previously been taken in Kharkiv in May of the year 2024 in just a single solitary month. In other words, with a group twice as large, he captured the same territory in 3 times the amount of time as was taken in Kharkiv. So this is an absolute failure.
But that's still far from the full list of the Russian general's successes. Up until that point, apparently, no one was paying attention to Lapin, or they were still trying to give him a chance to fix the situation. During all these failures, Lapin was even awarded.
In the Russian military political leadership, it is not typical to quickly, abruptly, and disgracefully fire generals who have failed and brought shame. This process is very slow. This is even connected to Putin's own psychological profile. He doesn't like to show failures, he doesn't like to display setbacks, and in fact, punishing or reprimanding a failed, unsuccessful general is itself a demonstration of the Russian army's media vulnerability and professional incompetence.
Now, however, Lapin has been transferred to the position of assistant to the president of Tatarstan. But how long will he last there? We'll see.
That's all for today. But very soon on the Front News program, there will be new, unique materials from our journalists gathered from the hottest spots of the war so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.